Have you ever wondered about secret societies and ancient mysteries? Well, we're going to uncover the fascinating history of Freemasonry, and it's a history that is so old and interesting. It's like diving into a real-life treasure hunt. My name's Right Worshipful Brother Darren Allatt, and welcome to Daily Masonic Progress. Let's start at the very beginning. Freemasonry has been around for a very long time, and we call ourselves free and accepted Masons. And if you're scratching your head wondering what that means, well, don't worry. Even many new Masons themselves find it quite confusing. But here's the thing. To really understand what Freemasonry is all about, we need to know where it came from. It's like your favorite superhero. If you don't know the backstory, well, how can you understand why they do what they do? So let's head into an imaginary time machine and travel all the way back into the ancient world. Now, many scholars think that Freemasonry has its roots all the way back into the ancient Egyptians. Meanwhile, other scholars think that it has something to do with the Jews who were forced out and had to leave and live in Babylon. And these ancient cultures were really interested in things like friendship, learning, and becoming better people. And guess what? Well, they're the same kind of things that us Freemasons care about today. But to find the real beginning of Freemasonry, we need to actually go back to ancient Rome. And in Rome, they had these groups called Collegia, and they were really important in Rome because, well, if you're living in a huge empire, it could feel quite lonely, just as it does today living in a big city. And people wanted to feel like they belonged somewhere. So the Collegia gave them that feeling. It was a place where you could make friends with people who understood what it was like to do your job and how your life was. And in a way, it's like the labor unions that we have today. Groups that help workers stick together and support each other. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit interesting. You see, as the Collegia became more and more popular, some of the Roman emperors started to get really worried. They thought that these groups might become too powerful. So they tried to stop people from joining the Collegia. But there was one type of Collegia they couldn't get rid of. It was the ones for the architects and the builders, because they were just too important to the success of the empire. And Rome needed them to create all of the amazing structures that we now have today. The Colosseum, the aqueducts. So while they actually banned many of these other collegias, well, the builders and the architects got to remain. Except what happened when the Roman Empire fell apart? Well, it is a bit of a mystery, and we don't know exactly what happened to these groups during the Dark Ages. Some have an exciting theory, though, that they think maybe these skilled builders hid on an island called Comensina in Italy. Can you imagine that? A whole island full of these master builders keeping their secrets safe, waiting for the right time to use their skills again. Now, as we move forward in time and we come to the Middle Ages, this is when Freemasonry as we know it today starts to really take shape. It was a time when the huge and beautiful cathedrals were being built all over Europe. But these weren't just regular builders. They were much more than that. They were like the superheroes of the building world. They were architects who could design these incredible structures. There were artists who could create beautiful sculptures, and they were leaders who could manage huge projects with hundreds of workers. They also had mathematics skills and could solve very complex problems to make sure that the buildings wouldn't collapse under their own weight. And some of them were even poets who wrote some of the most beautiful poetry. Now, the stonemasons of this time were very picky about who they'd let join. And if you wanted to become a stonemason, you had to prove that you were really good at your craft. And now this is where they had to then create something called a master's piece, an amazing piece of work that showed off all of their skills, which is like the ultimate test to show that you were good enough to become a mason in the first place. So then as time went on, something interesting started to happen. Now, this is where they started to invite people who were intelligent and gentlemen and weren't from the building trade. And they joined them and became Masons themselves. And these were scholars, people who loved learning and studying all sorts of things. But they didn't actually want to build cathedrals, but they were fascinated by the knowledge and the secrets that these operative stonemasons had. And when they started letting these scholars join the group, they called these new members accepted Masons. This was a big change because it meant that their group wasn't just about building. It started to become more about learning, thinking, and ideas and studying knowledge. But how did this change affect what would become Freemasonry, and how did it evolve into the group that we know today? So now that we've started letting these scholars into the craft, these accepted Masons, this changed what Freemasonry was all about. You see, by the year 1670, almost some 400 years ago, most of the people in Freemasonry at the time were no longer builders. It was full of these accepted Masons who joined because they wanted to learn and make friends with other people that were just like them. And imagine if your school's art club suddenly started accepting students who didn't paint or draw, but who just really loved looking at art and talking about it and learning from the philosophy of the art. And that's what happened with the Masons guilds of those times. Now, the change didn't happen overnight, but we can actually trace it back even further to the year 1390, again, almost 600 years ago, called the Regis Poem. And this poem talks about a prince named Edward who was a master of speculative masonry. Now, speculative is just a very old-fashioned way of saying thinking or philosophical. So even back then, some of these stonemasons were more interested in thinking about the big ideas than actually building. But then as time went on and more of these accepted Masons joined because they were attracted by the idea of being part of this special group that had its own secrets and its own traditions, and also liked the fact that they had certain freedoms that other people didn't have. It was like being part of an exclusive club with special privileges. And this change in who was joining Freemasonry reflects bigger changes that were happening in the world. You see, as the Middle Ages were ending and a new time called the Renaissance was beginning, people were getting more and more interested in learning, which gave birth to the Enlightenment period. And this continued to change Freemasonry as the men who were Masons at the time changed the world around them. Now, today, Freemasonry is very different from what it was when it started. It's no longer, as we said, a group for builders and architects, but it welcomes people from all different trades and backgrounds. We still use all of the old symbols and the ideas from when it was operative builders, but now when we have the influence of the speculative or the thinking Masons, we have really formed into something unique. So what kind of things are Freemasons doing today? Well, we help each other become better people, and we believe that by working together and supporting each other, we can all improve ourselves, but also the world around us. We love to discuss history and philosophy, and that can shape who we are as people. We do great things for our community, and many Masonic groups organise charity events and volunteer to help people in need. Now, you might be wondering, if Freemasonry is so old, why is it still around today? Well, that's a great question, and there are a few reasons for its prolific success. Firstly, Freemasonry has shown that despite the changing times, it is still relevant today as it was 700 years ago. But it has changed into something different when the world no longer needed the operative stonemasons guilds. Second, it brings people together who want to learn and grow across every period of time in history. There are always people who are curious and want to understand more about the world and themselves, and Freemasonry gives these people a place to meet and share ideas. And third, it teaches ideas that are important, like our grand principles of brotherly love, relief, and truth, but also trying to make yourself a better person. And these ideas that people cared about hundreds of years ago, they're still important today. So by learning about Freemasonry's history, we can see how it's lasted for a very long time and how it teaches people about the things that we as humans care about. It's pretty amazing to think that what started out with builders in ancient Rome is still around today. But Freemasonry does a little bit more than that. It reminds us of a few important things. It's good to work together with others because we can achieve so much more when we cooperate and support each other. We should always try to learn new things because the world is full of interesting ideas and knowledge to discover. And it's important to help make the world a better place, whether that's through charity work or being kind to others or supporting your fellow brethren. We can all do something to improve the world around us. Now, these ideas were important to the ancient builders who started what we know today as Freemasonry, and they're still important to us Freemasons today. They're good ideas for all of us to remember, whether we're Masons or not. So the next time you hear someone talk about us Freemasons, you'll know our story. It's one of great time, and it's quite an exciting one. It's full of secrets and skills of ancient builders and curious scholars. And it's a story about how we started out building cathedrals and ended up building something else. A global but also a hyper-local community, like-minded men trying to make themselves better. And who knows, maybe someday you'll learn the secrets of Freemasonry yourself. After all, our story isn't over, and if you wanted to become a Mason, you simply have to ask. Because Freemasonry continues to make history day by day, and Freemasons are all around the world. We're in most of your local neighborhoods, and we're going to be there for another 700 years. Pretty exciting, don't you think?